St. Adeline hires Montana nun.
Good morning, class.
Good morning.
I'm your new teacher, Sister Sophia.
Jason is a passionate music enthusiast who has gained significant fame by sharing his music videos on social media platforms. His popularity has skyrocketed, turning him into a veritable celebrity. Meanwhile, a mysterious young woman commits a shocking act by killing a nun and then donning the nun's clothing. As this unfolding mystery progresses, Jason returns to his Catholic school after the holiday break, accompanied by his sister Zoe. The school is staffed by nuns and priests who serve as educators. The principal of the school is named Rebecca, and she soon encounters a new teacher at the institution, Sophie. After exchanging pleasantries, Rebecca invites Sophie to her office, where they continue their conversation. It is in this setting that Sophie first lays eyes on Jason, and she experiences an inexplicable thrill. Later, when Sophie enters her own room, she discovers Jason's music content on various social media platforms. Overcome with emotion, she kisses the laptop screen while gazing at Jason's image. This moment reveals that Sophie is not a stranger to Jason, and that she has some ulterior motives for joining the school, as she is already familiar with him. The following morning, Sophie heads to her class and finds Jason engaged in conversation with a girl named Sarah. Unable to tolerate the sight, she watches as Sarah quickly moves to a seat away from him. Later, Sophie asks Jason's sister, Zoe, to lead the morning prayer. During the prayer, Zoe realizes that Sophie seems unfamiliar with the ritual, which strikes her as unusual for someone in Sophie's position. As it goes, Sophie becomes furious when she witnesses Sarah and Jason sharing a kiss. In a fit of anger, she confronts Sarah, sending Jason away and warning Sarah to stay away from him.
Do not let me catch you with that boy ever again.
After their class, Sophie approaches Jason and tells him, "I need to talk to you. Come to my room after school." When Jason arrives at her room, Sophie deliberately leaves the door ajar and positions herself in a way that allows Jason to catch a glimpse of her. As Jason looks through the open door, he becomes captivated by Sophie's beauty, but he retreats before she can notice him. Sophie feels a sense of triumph, pleased that her plan to lure Jason to her room has worked. The following weekend, as the students are being picked up by their parents, Sophie spots Sarah and Jason talking closely again. This sight reignites her jealousy and possessiveness towards Jason. Meanwhile, the school principal, Rebecca, approaches Sophie and requests permission to visit her ailing aunt. This request from the principal suggests that Sophie may have been using the pretext of a family emergency to justify her own absences from school. When Jason arrives home, he informs his parents of his decision to take a one-year break from his studies in order to focus entirely on pursuing his passion for music. Jason expresses his intention to resume his education after this year and seeks his parents' approval for this plan. Jason's mother appears to be supportive of his choice, acknowledging his desire to explore his musical talents. However, his father reacts with disappointment and firmly states that he does not agree with Jason's plan to set aside his studies for an entire year. The father insists that Jason should concentrate on his academics instead. This response from his father leaves Jason feeling disheartened and dejected. As a result, Jason retreats to the swimming pool where he can be alone and play his guitar, likely seeking solace and refuge in his musical pursuits. After obtaining Rebecca's permission to visit her aunt, Sophie makes her way to Jason's house. Upon arriving, she finds him strumming his guitar by the poolside. Sophie's deep affection for Jason is so strong that she cannot resist the urge to see him, even on weekends. Meanwhile, when Jason receives a phone call, Sophie quickly realizes that it is Sarah on the other end of the line. Overcome with jealousy and possessiveness, Sophie cannot stand the thought of Jason talking to Sarah. Determined to separate the two, Sophie devises a plan to remove Sarah from Jason's life. The following day at school, Sophie secretly slips a drug substance into Sarah's book. Then when Sarah opens the book in class, she unwittingly reveals the hidden substance.
I can't believe this. Marijuana.
As a result, Sarah faces suspension from the school for possessing drugs on the premises. On the same day, while conducting inspections of the students' rooms, Sophie discovers an alcohol bottle hidden under Jason's bed. Concerned that the principal might decide to suspend Jason as well, Sophie quickly intervenes. She argues that drinking alcohol is not a serious offense and insists that a lighter punishment would suffice, ultimately protecting Jason from any disciplinary action. As part of his punishment, he must remain at the school and assist Sophie in planting saplings on the school grounds. Then, now flashes back to Sophie's past. The very first time Sophie sees one of Jason's music videos, She instantly falls in love with him. Driven by this newfound infatuation, she begins collecting all of Jason's photos from various social media platforms, spending hours admiring them and becoming increasingly obsessed with him. In her quest to know more about Jason, she discovers that a new nun has been appointed as a teacher at his school. Fueled by her obsession, Sophie approaches the nun and murders her.
And that was it.
Then assumes the nun's identity to enroll in the school as Sophie. In reality, her true name is Laura, and she is a psychopathic killer. Now, in the present day, the weekend has arrived. Instead of going home, Jason's sister Zoe chooses to stay with him, as he is busy planting saplings in the school garden as part of his punishment. Sophie arrives at the moment, ostensibly to assist Jason, but her true intention is to seduce him. Despite Jason's efforts to resist his feelings, he finds himself increasingly drawn to Sophie. That same night, Sophie enters Jason's room, sets up a mobile camera on a table, and attempts to get closer to him. Initially, Jason pushes her away, but eventually, they both give in to their desires and become intimate. The following day, Jason Knight is filled with guilt and remorse over the intimate encounter he had with Sophie the previous night. Later, when Jason steps out of his room, Sophie sneaks in and picks up one of his shirts, inhaling its scent. Just then, Jason's sister Zoe walks in and catches Sophie in the act. Confused by the situation, Zoe questions Sophie about her presence in Jason's room. Sophie responds loudly, claiming she was conducting a casual inspection and insists that Zoe leave immediately, stating it is inappropriate for her to be there. Zoe exits the room and informs Jason about Sophie's unexpected visit. Observing Zoe conversing with Jason, Sophie seizes the opportunity to take Zoe to the principal, Rebecca, and accuses Zoe of peeking at the question paper in an attempt to get Zoe suspended from the school. Sophie urges Rebecca to suspend Zoe immediately. However, understanding Zoe's character, Rebecca opts to issue only a warning instead of enforcing a suspension. Stricken with guilt over his intimate encounter with Sophie, Jason heads to the school's church to confess his wrongdoing. To his surprise, Sophie appears in the confession room, and they become intimate once again. The next day, Sarah throws a party at her house and invites Jason to attend. After the festivities, Sarah attempts to get closer to Jason. In that moment, Jason is reminded of his previous intimate encounter with Sophie, causing him to quickly leave the situation. As he steps outside, Jason finds himself in trouble with the police for walking down the street while holding a bottle of alcohol. Just before he can be arrested, Sophie intervenes and manages to convince the officers to let Jason go. She then leads him to a hotel room, where she tries once more to get intimate with him. This time, Jason firmly rejects Sophie's advances, feeling overwhelmed by her persistent pursuit. He tells her that what she is doing is wrong. In response, Sophie expresses her strong desire to share her life with him, but Jason scolds her and walks away. Later, as Jason sits at a roadside table lost in thought, his father arrives. Even though Jason asks for his father's permission to take a one-year break from his studies, his father surprisingly agrees to it. They both return home together. Feeling heartbroken and distraught after Jason's rejection, Sophie falls into a state of deep depression. In her distressed state, she decides to follow Jason to his house. Zoe, who notices Sophie lingering near their home, becomes suspicious of her intentions and the nature of her relationship with her brother. As the weekend comes to an end, Jason and his sister Zoe head back to the school campus. Once there, Jason is shocked to find Sophie lying unconscious on her bed, surrounded by scattered pills on the table.
Hey, Sophie, what did you... Hey, wake up.
Frightened by the situation, Jason worries that Sophie may have attempted suicide. He desperately tries to wake her up, but despite his efforts, he finds himself at a loss as to what to do if she doesn't respond. Unbeknownst to Jason, Sophie is merely pretending to be unconscious. Seeing through her act, Jason threatens to file a formal complaint against Sophie. In response, Sophie warns him that if their inappropriate relationship as a teacher and student becomes publicly known, it could create serious problems for him. On the other hand, the school principal, Rebecca, decides to forgive Sarah for her past mistakes and allows her to return to the school. However, Sophie, unable to tolerate Sarah's presence at the school, becomes enraged by the situation. While Sarah is bathing in the washroom, Sophie seizes the opportunity and kills her, making the death appear as though it was an accident. In her twisted mind, Sophie believes that eliminating Sarah is the only way to keep Jason away from her and maintain her exclusive hold on him. As Jason begins to suspect that Sophie might have been responsible for Sarah's death, he confronts her about his suspicions. Sophie vehemently denies any involvement, claiming she had nothing to do with the incident. To further manipulate him, she reveals a video on her mobile phone showing their intimate moments together, using it as a means to blackmail Jason and keep him under her control. The following weekend, Jason and his sister Zoe return home. Sophie, under the pretense of her aunt's death, asks the school principal, Rebecca, for permission to follow them home. While Jason's family is dining at a restaurant, Sophie shows up and unexpectedly joins them at the table. Seeing Sophie there raises Zoe's suspicions that something is amiss with the situation. Zoe's concern deepens when Sophie fails to provide satisfactory answers to her probing questions. Meanwhile, Rebecca discovers that Sophie had lied about her aunt's death, further intensifying the growing tension. Zoe begins to pressure Jason to explain the situation, urging him to reveal the truth about what is really happening between him and Sophie. Zoe is determined to get to the bottom of this mysterious and potentially dangerous circumstance. Finally, Jason confesses to Zoe everything that has transpired between him and the woman they thought was Sophie. Hearing the full story, Zoe shares her own growing suspicions about Sophie's true nature and intentions. She suggests they investigate Sophie's laptop to uncover more answers. Jason and Zoe head to Sophie's room and open her laptop. To their astonishment, they discover photographs of the real Sophie, the woman whose identity has been assumed by someone else. In addition to that, Jason finds another laptop that contains every single photo he has ever uploaded on social media platforms. It becomes increasingly clear that the person they have been interacting with is not actually Sophie, but rather someone else entirely, a woman whose real name is Laura. Realizing the gravity of the situation they have uncovered, Jason and Zoe decide to take the incriminating evidence on the laptops and present their findings directly to the school principal, Rebecca. Meanwhile, the school principal, Rebecca, confronts Sophie about her weekend plans. Sophie struggles to come up with a convincing response, desperately trying to evade Rebecca's probing questions. However, the situation rapidly spirals out of control, ultimately forcing Sophie to kill Rebecca in a desperate attempt to conceal the truth. As Jason and Zoe approach Rebecca's room, they find it curiously empty. Deciding to search for the principal in the school's church, they head there. Just as they enter the church, Sophie realizes that Jason and Zoe have uncovered the truth about her true identity. Panicked, she immediately attacks Zoe. Rushing to defend his sister, Jason witnesses an unexpected turn of events. Rebecca appears from behind, revealing that she is not actually dead. In the ensuing chaos, as Sophie attempts to harm Rebecca, Jason grabs a screwdriver and fatefully stabs Sophie, resulting in her immediate death. And finally, Jason and Zoe, having successfully graduated, are on their way home, reflecting on the tumultuous events they endured and the dark secrets they uncovered. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.